Hey, I'm Rich,
I'm Nancy.
and we are the DPT duo. Today we wanted just to talk about the DPT interview and some tips that we had for you.
We really wanted to take a fresh take on the DPT interview. We both recently applied, and we felt that although there was good advice out there, it was a lot of the same advice that was going around. So we wanted to take a little bit from our experiences, the things that we learned, and just give you guys a different concept of how we got through it.
Yeah, so the first tip that we want to give you is to start saving money now. It can add up really fast, the expenses. Maybe you have to get a rental car, Airbnbs or hotels, if you got to fly, food, the whole thing, it starts to add up really fast. So if you start saving ahead of time, it won't come as such a shock when those things start adding up.
Yeah, we both interviewed in North Carolina, so it meant flights, car rentals, travel, and it really did end up costing a lot because we didn't just do it once, we did it twice.
Each.
So in order to save, a lot of places that you can look at is make sure that you try to go through your insurance. I had AAA at the time, so they actually have a lot of really great deals on car rentals, so I went through that, especially because I was underage. 25 and under is an underage fee for car rentals, so it's actually really good to try to see if your insurance will waive that. You can also go through your school and see if they have any discounts on traveling. Some schools do have partnerships with a lot of companies, so try it that way, or even try your work. A lot of big companies can sometimes give you a group rate for certain things. Another thing with saving is not just your money, but also saving your days. You want to let your managers or your professors or somebody that's in charge of maybe a place that you go work at know ahead of time that you might be gone for this day or these two days so you have some time to practice. And you can always change your mind afterward if you don't get an interview, but having those days and letting them know will be professional on your part, as well as give you a little bit of room to feel okay about taking those days off once it comes to it, knowing that you probably will get your request approved.
Yeah, and so the next tip would be for what you're going to wear to the interview. Definitely want to plan that ahead of time. The way I approach interviews, not just DPT interviews, just in general, is that you want to look professional, but you also want to stand out just a little bit. So for me, I just wore a regular black suit, but the colors I chose was a little bit more than it was like my tie, for example, was a little bit more like, oh, it catches the eye real quick. I tend to wear wooden watches just in general, so I made sure I wore my watch at the time. It gives you that professional look that you have a watch, but because it's wooden, that's like more my personality. I only wear wooden jewelry. And then like something like my socks, wear socks that are a little bit not just plain black socks or plain brown socks, but socks that maybe have a little bit more color. That way it just gives them that little bit to remember you by.
Yeah, so I personally had to buy all new items when my interview came around. I just didn't have, I had outgrown some things had just kind of lived their life already. So I ended up borrowing a shirt from my mom, and I personally, when I wear pants, I'm always showing, my ankle's always showing, so I had ankle length pants that were professional. I really like them, and I'm a tennis shoe type of girl, so I wore loafers instead of heels or flats, just because for me that's more comfortable, since our interview was a day-long interview and we were going to have a tour as well, so I wanted to make sure that my feet would be comfortable. So that was just my personal touch on why I wore certain colors or certain items that day. If you are struggling to kind of make that investment at the moment, you can always borrow from friends and family and then just try to combine some of those pieces together, and then that way you can kind of figure out what pieces you may have to purchase and save up for, or even buying them secondhand can always be a really great way to do that. Oh, and break in your shoes. Break in your shoes. Break in your shoes, because it hurts. It hurts really bad not to break in your shoes. Most of the time you wear shoes for 20 to 30 minute interviews, you go home, you change your shoes, you're fine. But since these are so long, you don't notice that maybe the shoe that you thought you had broken in really well isn't meant for a day-long interview, and then you end up not liking what it is that you wore and you're uncomfortable the day of, which you never want to be. Which is why we really suggest doing a mock interview. With this, I mean you want to do a dress rehearsal. Dress full out in your outfit. Take a day to walk around whatever campus you're nearby or up and down stairs, and making sure that you're comfortable in what you're wearing. You can even host one if you're within a club. If your school has like an OPTS club or exercise science club, a lot of people end up going into PT, so you can try to host one with other people. But finding other people that you can practice that are PT and non-PT related people. This is just because you never know who you're going to be interviewing with the day of. We both had people who weren't involved with PT as another person in our interview. So just making sure that you practice one-on-one, you practice group interview, you practice two people type settings. And research your school beforehand to know what type of interview they're going to have.
Yeah, so along with the mock interview, this is more a topic for actually in the interview, but you can also make it useful in the mock interview, is bring a notebook. Bring a notebook with just paper and a pen. Make sure it looks nice, it's not all beat up. And the purpose of that is you can either take notes, so it'll, like if you're in, so like our interviews were multi-steps, like we did like a tour, we did a meeting with the director, all these things. So like if you're in the meeting with the director and you have like notes that you want to take, they're going to notice that, and it may or may not go back to the admission committee. So if they do end up saying, oh, this person was like taking notes, super involved, then that looks good on you. But also for when you're actually in your interview, our interview was 2-on-1, two interviewers with just me. And then I had some stuff written down, some questions written down for them. And I just so happened, I remembered some of my questions and I had forgot the last one. And I really wanted to ask. So I was like, oh, actually, can I take a look at my notebook real quick? I had another question, I just can't remember. And they're like, oh yeah, sure. They're really excited that I was so eager to ask a certain question. So practicing that in your mock interview is definitely going to just give you the practice and the comfort of being able to reach for that or have it out to write notes, just so it's more of a natural thing that you're not trying to force when the actual day of your interview comes.
Yeah, with the mock interview, because you're going to be fully dressed out, it's for you to take it seriously as though you really are going into an interview. It's not just something that you're doing with your friends. This way you can kind of figure out what things might go wrong. Oh, I'm always fidgeting with this part of my shirt. Or somebody can tell you, oh, dude, your shirt is actually kind of see-through. You just never noticed before. But also practicing with someone that you're comfortable with. A lot of the time, you may not take it as seriously, and then you end up never finishing your answers fully, or not really developing that answer all the way, which is something that I was really bad at until I got like 3 days before my interview, and I was like, oh man, I don't actually know what I'm going to say, because I never actually finished my answers when I was practicing, because I thought, oh, I'll just practice later. So that's why our next tip is making sure that you outline your answers. I'll let you go ahead and speak to that.
Yeah, so when I was practicing for my interview, you practice like, you're going to do this anyway. You're going to look up interview questions that might get asked, like, oh, what are you about? What's your education in? Maybe some different, whatever. You get the point. There's going to be a whole list that you're going to try to practice. That way you at least have an answer for everything. For me, I took that and I outlined everything. So if it was, tell us a little bit about yourself, I already knew. I'm going to say this. These are my degrees. This is what I like to do for fun, and this is why I want to become a physical therapist. Something like that. Something to that effect. I don't remember exactly, but I outlined it. Boom, boom, boom. And so what I like to say, and what I was teaching her when she was interviewing after me, is you want to keep it short, sweet, and leading. So if I'm like I said, I'm making this up because I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but if I said, oh, I majored in kinesiology, exercise science, and I also had another major in deaf studies, and I had an emphasis in entrepreneurship. So short and sweet, like if they were asking about my education, and leading, because they wouldn't necessarily expect me to say entrepreneurship. And then you kind of give them that softball, like, are you going to take it? Are you going to take it? You're going to like hit that, hit the ball just because it's easy. they can, or they can just totally ignore it. But that's okay because you should try to lead them into something else. Yes. Yeah. So revisiting the application. The point of revisiting it is not so you can just regurgitate everything that you wrote on there. It's to at least be aware of what you put. That way, because you're not sure if the interviewers are gonna look at your application before they interview you or not. So in my interview, they told me like, "Oh, we didn't look at any of your application, so you might cover some of that." Like they literally told me that as when I was answering something. But some schools don't do that at all. They actually look through it first. Some schools, or actually my school, there was actually different interviewers depending on the professor. I didn't find this out until like last week. They actually looked at the person's thing before they interviewed, and that's in the same school, in the same program. So it just kind of depends. You want to be prepared to be able to talk about those again and highlight them, or to also bring in something else that doesn't necessarily fit in the application, but that can show some of the value you can add.
Yeah, applications don't always cover everything you've done, and the questions, you can't always make them, they're open-ended most of the time, but they don't always fit everything. So in the interview, you want to find ways that a question could apply to another part of your life, something else that you might want to share. And you won't know that unless you revisit and kind of almost look at the outline of your own application and be like, you know what, I didn't talk enough about this. Or since turning in my application, I did this, this, and that, and I really want them to know that. So then you can kind of bring that into the interview with you, because they're going to look at your application at some point. So sometimes it's better to just highlight other aspects and then kind of have that highlight the things that you did give them.
Yeah, and so the next tip that we want to give you is researching the school, researching the program. This is particularly important because from my experiences and from everyone I've heard of, they all say that one of the questions or like a version of the question they're going to ask you is why this program? And you're going to need to have an answer that's not so generic. They want to know if you're actually interested in the program, or are you the person who just applied everywhere, interviewing everywhere, and just trying to get in wherever. You actually want to show that passion toward the program. So knowing their mission, knowing their vision of not just the program but the school itself is going to be really helpful. You don't have to memorize it, especially if you are applying to more places, but just to get the general gist of it. Like they even asked me, because I had mentioned like, oh, I really love the mission of this program. They're like, oh, what is the mission? Why do you relate to it? And I was like, I can't really remember the mission off the top of my head verbatim, but I like it. It's patient-centered care, it's innovative, it's not just research, it's clinical research and teaching and the way they cover things. So knowing that ahead of time is really good. And I also went as far as researching some top 10 like facts about camels, because we're the Campbell camels, just so if I had the opportunity to throw in like a little joke about it, because I'm just like, that's like my personality is to be like funny. So that's why I wanted that in my back pocket. I didn't end up using it because it wasn't right, but there was other ways I was able to get in some jokes in there, so I kind of didn't need it anyways.
Yeah, so it's not just knowing the statement in general, it's about finding it how that statement and vision actually fits in within your own statement and your own vision of what you want to bring to physical therapy. Because in that way, it's not just about you trying to show yourself off to the program and showing them that you relate to them, but it's also for you to figure out whether or not you relate to the program. That's actually how Richie ended up wanting to go to Campbell. He was kind of looking over the researching the program's missions and values, and then he really actually related to this one school, and that's why he decided that that was the one school he actually wanted to go for. Even though we're from California, we wouldn't have otherwise thought we would end up here in North Carolina, but that's kind of how it went. And then with this, you can also find out exactly how the school does their interview as well. A lot of schools will tell you whether it's one-on-one, a group setting, 2 people or more.
Rolling admission or not, which makes a huge difference. Get your application in early if it's rolling admission, but we'll save that.
Yeah, so those are all the tips that we have for you guys today. We are going to be doing a part 2 of this video. This is just, we didn't want to make this too long, so these are just a few of the tips that we have. I'm really excited for the second part. But just as a reminder, we are the DPT Duo. You can find us on Instagram sharing our journey at the DPT Duo.